We're in Charleston, South Carolina, visiting with Nathalie Dupree, one of the premier chefs of the United States, but also you are credited with bringing back the attention and recognition that the Southern cuisine should have. Nathalie, how did that happen?
Well, when I returned from living in London with my favorite former husband, my mother-in-law, who was a dear woman, invited us to live in social circle and have us purchase 15 acres with her. So, so we did, and we made a restaurant in a warehouse that we cleaned up.
In this little Georgia town?
And well, halfway between Covington and Social, across from the Hub and the Tri-County Cattle Auction Barn. And so when we were there, we, one, grew our own herbs because nobody was selling herbs. I mean, for instance, fennel was one thing that I had great success growing. And then we had a small garden. And so we grew as many of our vegetables and herbs as we could because it was expensive, and also at that time there wasn't a lot available. And then the local farmers would bring us things. Well, when I had been in London, I missed Southern food, but a lot of that food kind of morphed into it, like the greens and so forth. But when I started doing French techniques, I had to use the food that was available, and it was Southern food, and so I started adjusting it and making it work and so forth. So it was just a natural evolution for me. And then years later, after I ran Rich's cooking school for about 10 years, when they closed it, I had to do something to make some money. And everyone encouraged me to do something Southern. And I wouldn't do an old Southern book because I felt that people didn't want to eat that way anymore, but that some of it was so good you couldn't help it.
Of course.
So I did a book called New Southern Cooking that had old vegetables with new styles.
And the herbs.
And herbs. And, well, of course, herbs were once grown a lot here, but then they stopped. And then I did new vegetables like zucchini in old styles, like squash. I would do the same thing as I would a yellow squash. So, and there was a lot of hoo-ha about my green beans, which were too crisp. But they weren't pole beans, you know. I did cut pole beans too, but anyway, so I did New Southern Cooking, and it started a television show. Yeah, caught on.
Kristian Niemi, you have come to this at a slightly later stage.
Yeah.
But you're able to build your work on what's happened before by people like Nathalie, and tell us what you're doing now in this new movement of elevating Southern foods.
Well, honestly, it goes back 24 years or so when I moved to South Carolina, and I have a dog-eared copy of her book, and I mean, my first restaurant was called Mr. Friendly's New Southern Cafe. I took over a sandwich shop named Mr. Friendly's and never had a chance to change the name. So to basically to build on what she'd done, just added the tagline New Southern Cafe, because I had gone to culinary school in Minnesota, worked at probably one of the foremost Midwestern haute cuisine places where we sourced everything locally. Moved to South Carolina thinking I was going to move to an agricultural state and be able to replicate basically what I did up there in South Carolina, and I got to South Carolina and found that although it was an agricultural state, I couldn't find anything. So I had to do the same thing. I had to grow all my herbs at my house. I'd ride my motorcycle on the weekends. On the one day I had off, I'd ride through the back roads and looking for farmers who had anything to sell us. And so, you know, we did the same thing. I took all those techniques that I learned in culinary school and working up in Minnesota at the Dakota, and translated those into a Southern menu using what I could find locally. And now here we are 24 years later, and we're sitting at a table with ingredients that I never could have gotten back then. So it's really, it's been very exciting to see how this Southern food movement and especially the ingredients has moved forward.
It's taken off.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it really has.
And Nathalie, I think the stories that go with these are part of what makes it so exciting. Would you think that the stories that go with these heritage foods?
And of course, well, and these are heritage foods, but a lot of them lived along. I mean, I had a woman that worked for me, Kate Almond, and she would talk about the foods that she grew up with. A lot of it, of course, was misinformation on one sort or the other that we.
But still stories, romantic
stories. But romantic stories. And as I said, we were talking earlier about turnip greens and whether or not you needed a frost, and that was one of hers. But they do have to have cold, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, what had happened at that time was that in the 60s and early 70s, a lot of us went to Europe for the first time, that young people could really afford to go to Europe, and we ate over there all those fresh vegetables. Oh. And so we came back with the desire to bring that to our country. And Alice Waters is famous for it, and she has done a fabulous job. But all of us everywhere were bringing back what we learned. Once you learn how to cook and the techniques, you want to use it on what tastes good to you.
You said you had a meeting down here, and serendipitously, Glenn Roberts and David Shields were there.
Right.
And that was an explosion.
Right. That was certainly did lead on to David becoming fascinated with a lot of the things that Glenn was doing, and then David is so brilliant he just takes off on his own, as does Glenn. So yes, that was a whole program on showing off low country food, and we met regularly.
And Kristian, what we have today were things that you couldn't have dreamed of having when you first started. Tell us the stories about what we're getting ready to enjoy today,
so
please.
We've got, from Glenn Roberts at Anson Mills, we've got the Sea Island red peas, and we've got Carolina Gold rice middlings, which is basically just broken rice, and we basically prepared it like grits. I think those are one of the most flavorful peas there is. I mean,
tiny little peas. I'm glad I don't have to shell them.
I love those peas. I love a few other peas more. White Acres.
The rice peas are spectacular.
Peas. Oh, they're so good.
I know it's probably sacrilege to say this, but I've never been a fan of black-eyed peas.
Well, they weren't really raised for people.
Exactly.
To eat. They were raised for cattle.
They still shouldn't be raised for people to eat.
Whatever the cattle had left over, you ate if you didn't have a lot of money. So.
Yeah. Well, now we have Sea Island red peas, so we can eat those.
And the rice middlings, which are kind of like it's broken grains of rice. Is that correct?
So back in the day, they were the broken pieces of rice that you couldn't sell on the market, and now instead, Glenn mills them to break it up so we can have rice middlings.
Of course, they cook faster.
And they do cook.
Have to have instant rice.
Exactly. And then we've got collard greens from Bradford Family Farms in Sumter. They're a special kind of collard green that's
very tender.
Super tender. You can eat the stalks and everything, and I've never had a collard green like them before. You can actually chop them up and toss them in vinaigrette and make a salad out of it.
And here he is, a young fellow, by my standards, finding things that his family was growing 200 years ago.
Exactly. And then the pork is actually from someone here in Charleston, Tank Jackson at Holy City Hogs, and he raises nothing but heritage hogs. So these are all pastured hogs that live off the land with just a little bit of supplemental diet. But the meat is much darker, much richer, marbled with more fat. It's the opposite of what pork became in America, which is the other white meat, which is the biggest travesty to happen to hogs ever.
Poor pigs.
Poor pigs, exactly.
Yeah. Charleston was the center of a lot of truck farming, vegetable farming, but a lot of these farmers would like to retire, and we want this land to stay in agriculture. Are these is there an opportunity for young people to grow these heritage crops and perhaps take that land in a different direction?
Yes, and all over South Carolina, really. I mean, the asparagus and things that we used to grow ought to be coming back and letting people grow local asparagus, for instance. But yes, the restaurant chefs won because it tastes better. And I mean, there's nothing like our rice, our Carolina Gold and Charleston Golds, but also, so it not only does it taste better, but for every ingredient they list, they can get 50 cents on their menu. That's what someone said.
Oh, when they say, oh, this wonderful
right,
heritage,
right.
da-da-da.
When you say, see island peas, that's 75 cents or $1, you know.
And we have the tourism business in South Carolina.
The tourism business.
To support that in the
That's
local
right.
restaurants.
And people want that too. People want our food. When people travel, they want to eat the local food.
Of course they do.
And for a long time, we ignored that. Everyone thought that they should serve the same food. Everyone was serving continental food.
I see.
The first restaurant I ever worked at down in Charleston, that's what we served.
Continental food.
Really?
And
Yes.
that's right. And so finally we have recognized that what we do is valuable and that people crave those same flavors that I craved when I was living in England.
And Kristian, I imagine that as a chef, it's fun to think of creative ways to use these. I think today we're having things pretty much in straightforward ways, but sometimes y'all can really say, oh, let's do this and that and go off.
Well, they just, I mean, Natalie knows all the different dishes that were created, you know, hundreds of years ago or whatever, all the way up to, you know, through Escoffier and all the great French chefs. You can play off all of that, and then when you bring in all of the other different cultures that most chefs are playing with now, from Japanese and Indian and African, all the different, all those different cultures, to use our ingredients to make that food is a blast. Like my new restaurant is a Cajun Creole menu, but it's a locally influenced Cajun Creole menu. So we don't bring anything in really from Louisiana and Mississippi or Alabama. We bring everything in from South Carolina. So we make our own andouille and tasso using heritage hogs. We get all of our other things from around here, but everything's done with a Creole or Cajun, lens.
Well, and when you think about it, the people who lived in Charleston sent their children to Europe and they traveled, and so even now, y'all are saying we're going to use the wonderful things that are grown here and local, but there's no reason to say that we can't be creative and imaginative in how we prepare them.
But
Exactly.
also, we have to give credit. Those old cooks, they did know how to cook.
Oh, they did.
You know, I mean, there is a technique to making a biscuit. But they made biscuits in big biscuit bowls because they had a large family they had to feed. So their whole way of mixing biscuits and the flours that they use, which was usually a southern flour.
Soft wheat flour.
Soft wheat flour. They had techniques. They weren't devoid of techniques, but a lot of it was to accommodate the weather. And the heat in the homes, but also how big families and some of those things, so that they could put this much food on the table and really enjoy it. The old cookbooks still have such fabulous recipes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I did one today with our corn fritters, and so it's
We're not reinventing.
We're not reinventing.
No, we're just playing off of what people have done for,
And Kristian, if people want to really delve into this, what are some of the opportunities that are out there? Are there local markets and then farm-to-table events? What are some things you recommend people look into if they want to learn more about this?
Well, take the time to go to your, find where your local farmer's market is, because invariably you're going to find the local farmers there. Amongst all the bric-a-brac, there will be local farmers there, local ranchers, local dairy people, local cheesemakers. Support them, buy those things. Taste what is local. Taste what's being raised around you. Talk to them, because if they grow it they inevitably are very well versed on preparing it. So you can get great ideas from them. Farm-to-table events around, those are popping up more and more.
And that's when you cook in bulk too. I
We
mean,
do.
the old way
Yeah.
that you were
That's
talking
right.
about,
Yeah.
feeding
That's
a lot
right.
of
We
people.
cook for 120 people at a farm-to-table event over open fires and using ingredients that we source locally. Yeah, you need to come do one with us.
Well,
Yeah.
I'd love to, but and also these vegetables and things don't stand alone. For instance, you will see those peas mixed with the rice.
Mm-hmm.
So someone starts growing a product that is heritage, and then someone else
Has the complement.
makes a complementary
Yes.
vegetable.
Yes.
So now we have Midlands, and we have this lovely rice, and they're kind of symbiotic in a way,
They are.
and go back to what was available at the same time in the country. You would have dried peas and dried rice, and then you could make it almost any time of the year. It would last. So there was a lot of this that was very important to subsistence.
Nathalie and Kristian, I have loved hearing the stories of these and the input that both of y'all have had in helping this happen, and thinking that y'all are encouraging these young farmers to continue doing what you need in order to continue to cook so wonderfully. And but I think what we need to do now is to enjoy this wonderful Southern meal in your home that you've so graciously opened to us.
Thank you. And I love these foods too.